Hi everyone, this is Will from the Freedom Center's Mental Health Show, Wednesday nights from 6 to 7. Valley Free Radio is committed to broadcasting voices missing from the mainstream media and silenced by the corporate economy. Support programming like the Freedom Center Mental Health Show by sending a tax-deductible contribution to a WXOJ. Call us at 413-584-1160.
Hello everyone, this is Bonfire Madigan. We're not crazy, the system is. Tune into the Radical Mental Health Show hosted by the Freedom Center, Wednesday nights, 6 to 7 p.m. on Valley Free Radio, WXOJ 103.3 FM.
And this is Will Hall with the Mental Health Show on Wednesday night. Welcome everybody. And tonight we have a really cool guest, Barney Plisko, who's been involved with the Freedom Center for, how long have you been involved with the Freedom Center for, Barney?
Almost 2 years.
2 years. So we're going to be talking with Barney about dealing with bipolar disorder diagnosis and the mental health system and all kinds of things. We invite people to call in as well. So I'm very happy to welcome Barney to the show. Welcome, Barney.
Thank you.
And I met Barney. You've been, I guess, a regular at the support group for how long? Like a couple of years now.
Yeah, I found out about it before I came back to New England. I did a Google search while I was in Oregon for Northampton Psychiatric, and I found Freedom Center, and I've been coming on and off since November of 2004.
Northampton Psychiatric. So we're just going to take some time to talk about your sort of whole. You've had a long, difficult, interesting, circuitous journey in the mental health system, would you say?
Yeah, I've done an international mental health experience.
International mental health experience.
Yeah. Shall I start from the beginning?
Yeah, well, when we say mental health, I think of like there's so many different things that go into that. But we were talking before, and you were saying that you had really started dealing or realizing that something was going on before you were actually in the system. What was that all about? What was that like for you?
Well, I guess like everything else, it begins in childhood. I had an abnormally close relationship with my mother, basically between the ages of 9 and 11. Then she left, she came back, and she left again. And there was an abnormal closeness, whether it was sexual or not, I don't know, but it was emotionally she talked to me like an adult when I was 8 or 9, and
so it's the kind of thing that's verging on abuse. And
yeah. Some family members have made the, quote unquote, what she did to you, and like, well, what did she do? But it manifested itself when I was in puberty because I didn't grow up, quote unquote, normally. I didn't date. I was very withdrawn. I was at one time a straight A student, so that was my way of dealing with it and playing my little clarinet. But I never, became a quote-unquote functioning person. I got into alcohol and marijuana when I was 18. By the time I was 20, I was a blackout drinker. But then I got into other addictions, mostly gambling. So from early childhood, you were withdrawn and separate, and so this is something that's really kind of been part of your whole. I mean, it sounds actually very familiar to me, frankly, because when people ask me like, well, when did your whole thing? I mean, I remember weird dissociative, losing my mind states when I was in like third grade. So. Yeah, I can remember when I was about 16 or 17, because at that time I was like top of my class at Amherst High School.
Oh, so you're from this area then?
Yes, I went. Well, I'm from just outside New York City. I moved up here when I was 5. So yeah, I've been here for 40 years. But I remember saying to myself, it's like the inside of my head, the walls inside my head fell down. Because after that, I became very, let's put it this way, very sexually interested, but withdrawn. I didn't date or get involved with other people. I found my own little private universe that sex took over probably when I was 15 or so.
Okay, but that's like, I mean, that's like the sort of well into puberty, very much like, beginning adolescent sexuality. But this was something that was more disruptive, difficult.
This was 3 or 4 hours a day, and it drove my stepmother crazy because, well, I don't want to go into the details, but it was over the top. And then, like I say, then when I was 18...
Was that the only thing that was going on? Was there other kind of stuff that was...
No.
Because you said like the walls of your reality sort of fell apart.
I lived to please my father. My father was really proud of me because of my success in school, but then it stopped. It's like as soon as I turned 16 or 17, I basically stopped doing everything. My schooling, my grades went way down, and I got into drinking at this job that I took and became a partier after never partying with anybody until I was 18.
What were you feeling, like a lot of anxiety and depression at this time? Or
well, it was like I didn't talk to many people. I was an isolationist. I got picked on a lot when I was in school, and I just kind of withdrew from everybody. But then when I got this job, I turned 18, got a car, started meeting people who were partiers, and I just partied with them. And then I tried going to school at UMass in the fall of '79, and I just continued the partying and the blackouts and everything.
Yeah, UMass is definitely pretty conducive.
Yes, I'm a survivor of the Southwest high-rise dormitory. I was only there for one semester, but
if there's anybody else who's a survivor of the Southwest high-rise dormitory who wants to give us a call, we're actually we're inviting folks to call in and join the conversation, and the number is 585-1033. So feel free to call the station here at 585-1033. So you went to UMass and then...
Yeah, and I survived one semester, didn't even carry a 2.0. I tried going back again in the spring of '80, but I was totally withdrawn. I listened to Pink Floyd.
Oh man,
and just floated.
So we're talking The Wall, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's actually really very dangerous, and it's definitely an unidentified cofactor in a lot of psychotic breaks. Is Pink Floyd The Wall? So then what happened? What happened after that?
Well, I floated from job to job and ended up joining the military. That was my solution. I was ashamed of myself. I started getting heavy into gambling. And so after I turned 20, I joined the Navy because I wanted to clean myself up. I wanted to be independent financially. I wanted to do something that was honorable. It drove my father nuts. He talked me out of it when I was 19.
So you didn't need money to go to the Navy. You went for the whole like be all you can be kind of like get your life together thing. Yeah.
It was
discipline and the boot camp kind of.
Right. And
I think that actually is a motivation for a number of people. If you look at the advertising, there's sort of this like become a real man. Get your act together.
That basically was my primary motivation. Ironically, I got through boot camp playing the clarinet. If it weren't for the clarinet, I never would have probably gotten through boot camp. But
what do you mean you got through boot camp playing?
Well, they formed a band, and my company was the first company to form this special unit group that most of whom were involved with playing music in the band. I went to boot camp outside Chicago, and we did gigs around the Chicago area. We had to extend boot camp for a couple of weeks, but it was pretty cake. My biggest challenge was folding my sheets and doing that kind of stuff. But I made it, and my folks actually came out to see me graduate. They drove out from here to Chicago. And then from there, I went to San Diego.
Stationed in the Navy.
Yeah, I went to San Diego after boot camp. I applied for the Naval Academy, was initially accepted, but I had to fill out more paperwork.
That's where you become on track to be an officer?
Right, yeah. Right. But I realized after being on my first ship a few months, I was like, I don't belong in the military. This is not for me. But yet I extended myself for 6 years total.
Oh, wait, so why wasn't the military for you?
Again, I was dealing with the military like I dealt with childhood, or with, I withdrew. I didn't talk to people, but I learned the game. I learned the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is what the military functions by. It's what keeps people in line, so to speak. You learn the chain of command, what you can do. I immediately stopped smoking pot and drinking excessively. Well, I drank on and off excessively through my military experience, but illegal drugs was out. This was the time when Reagan had taken office and, injected the military with a lot of money and a lot of support, because before that it was the Vietnam hangover where the military was just in shambles. So I guess I benefited from that because my pay went up. I did 1.5 years on my first ship, and then I went to advanced schooling in San Diego.
Okay, so you're still dealing with these like things that would later become mental health. And let me put you on hold there for a second, because we actually have a caller right when we get started, which is great. So let me put this person on the line. Are you there?
Yeah, hi.
Okay, go ahead.
There's a little bit of feedback, so I'm not sure if... Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, fantastic. I just wanted to say thank you both so much for being there this evening. The show already is fascinating.
Thanks.
I have a question for the gentleman who's been speaking about his life. You were talking a little bit earlier about having struggles early on. And I have a friend who is not in this state, but in another state, and she's dealing with her sibling who has been having what I guess the psychiatrists are terming like early psychotic behavior. She's 16, and I just wondered, like, one of the suggestions was that she be put in some type of institution temporarily and given medication. And just on a gut level, my friend is feeling like that's a very bad idea. What are some, I guess, suggestions that you would have for this person to consider before they do something as radical as that?
Wow. Well, thanks for calling, and that's definitely a really difficult question. I mean, in general, I don't know exactly where are you going? Oops. Lost her. Well, if you are calling from the Northampton area, I recommend getting in touch with the Freedom Center and coming to one of our support groups, because obviously there's like so little information. It's really hard to do any kind of detailed kind of suggestion or advice or trying to figure out what to say to a situation like that. I think that in general, caution is extremely wise when you're dealing either with institutionalization or with medication, because so many people get really harmed by the mental health system and so many people get harmed by drugs. That's not to say that everyone does, but I think especially when we're dealing with a 16-year-old, generally speaking, the psychiatric drugs that are prescribed to teenagers are prescribed in a way that's called off-label prescription, which means that doctors have historically had the right to give any kind of drug that they want to any one of their patients, whether or not the drug was designed for that or not. It's just something that the medical profession has given this authority to doctors. So it's called off-label prescription. And most of the psych drugs that are given to teenagers are off-label prescription. And we've known more and more of the dangers of these drugs. And so I think that in general, and the way in which also the pharmaceutical companies are distorting the science and distorting the actual risks that are involved with these drugs. So, I would say, exhaust every other possibility first. Don't jump to, the person is pre-psychotic. There's a big push, a marketing push to diagnose people earlier and earlier, and this means more profits for the pill companies. So I think that, skepticism is really wise. And I would just encourage you to, get in touch with the Freedom Center, either email us or give us a call or come by our support group and we can talk about this further. But I want to get back to Barney quite a bit. I know people are calling, but just we'll try and take some calls a little bit later in the show as well. But so you're on your first ship, right? And
yeah,
we're still working the system.
Yeah, right? I spent 545 days on my first ship and just basically stayed to myself.
545 days.
Yeah, that was 1.5 years. That was my first ship. And then I went to San Diego and went to school. Didn't do very well in school, compared to what I should have done. And they gave me orders to Japan, and I fought them. I says, if you send me to Japan, I'm going to do very poorly. And they said, you're in the military. You're going to go where we tell you. So I went to Japan. I had a very high stress job, and I didn't do well with it. And what started me at the mental health system was I was standing shore patrol while I was while I was on my second ship, and somebody threatened to kill me after we had this fight on shore patrol. I've had a long-standing problem with my temper. Anyway, for some reason I had this awareness to go to the mental health clinic on the Yokosuka, Japan Naval Base. And I was given Thorazine, which is
a really heavy antipsychotic.
Great sleeping aid.
Yeah.
They wanted to keep me there a week for observation, but I said, I'm not going to wimp out. I'm going to go back to my ship. I'm going to do okay. I'm going to fight through this. But things just got worse.
When you say things got worse, what was happening?
My behavior became very bizarre. I disobeyed orders. I left the ship when I wanted to. I mean, they could have court-martialed me. But I had a guardian angel. He was the second in command on the ship, and he arranged another psych eval. And the psych eval was a anti-Semitic psychiatrist who called me every Jewish epithet in the book and said,
wow.
There's nothing wrong with you. You straighten your butt out or we'll burn you. Basically what he said. And I went back to the ship, and the XO said, it's the second in command on a ship is the XO. And he said, I was just trying to help you get out. My behavior continued to get worse. They took me away from my responsibilities. I never got any kind of discipline, but they sent me to another psych eval in October of '84, and it was with the guy that I had seen the first time who had prescribed Thorazine. And basically he wrote the report that got me out of the military. But you
were discharged for medical?
Yeah, it took a while, but I eventually got discharged honorably on February 12th of '85. And probably during the last 6 to 8 months of my enlistment, I probably saw some sort of psychologist or psychiatrist about 4 or 5 times. I didn't blame the Navy for what happened. Basically, they said, he had a lousy childhood, and that's why he is the way he is. And I got out. I was just short of, just short of my 24th birthday when I got out. And so I went back home and basically resumed the behaviors that I had before I went in. I remember disappearing for a couple of months on a gambling and escape spree. My father found me one time. I was doing circles around the house because I was running out of money. I was gambling. I gambled away a student loan. And then my father told me about a job in '86. And in January of '86, I became employed and maintained full employment until October of 1991. And again, through this time, I got involved with drinking and drugs again. I got into rock and roll, and at the advanced age of 27, and my ego got huge, and I bounced around all kinds of bands and was always around, pot and booze and acid and anything else what was there.
Which probably didn't help.
No. My father died a couple of months after I quit my job, and I really did a number on him because he was also emotionally crippled himself. He smoked himself to death at the age of 52. And, I broke a lot of laws. I got away with it.
But, what kinds of things? Other than the drugs, obviously.
Using drugs and doing other things that I don't want to say on the radio.
Understandable.
But by the end of '93, I was living in my car homeless in Vermont, just outside where I had been working. I got this part-time job in a hardware store up in Vermont. So in beginning of '93, I went back to my stepmother, and my sister now was 17 and talking about sex and everything, and I could overhear their conversations, and I just hide. By the end of '93, I was pretty messed up. I wasn't drinking or drugging that much, but I gambled a lot. And that's been a problem I've had my whole life. In January '94, I hit bottom, started going to 12-step groups for gambling. And the lady that I was renting a room from in Brattleboro, Vermont, said that I had bipolar disorder. It was the first time I'd ever heard the term.
And the Navy hadn't really given you a diagnosis, or they hadn't really talked to you about it? Or?
They mentioned anxiety, they mentioned depression, but somewhere along the line they mentioned cyclothymia. And cyclothymia used to be the term that now they call, I think, bipolar 2 or bipolar 3. It's like a watered down version of full blown bipolar
Yeah,
disorder.
it's like supposed to be milder, supposedly.
Yeah. Like I say, the new DSM-4. Well, it's not so new now. That's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that the American Psychiatric Association goes by, that gives you the instant diagnosis of what you have. And I finally got that diagnosis in July of '95 after I moved to Oregon to try to get my old job back as a paint salesman. And
was that helpful to you to get the diagnosis? Did you help you sort of get more insight, or
yeah,
sort of
it was
a light bulb went off or something?
I always knew that there was something wrong with me, but I didn't know what it was. And now I was, in Oregon.
But it sounds like you've got this tension between like a diagnosis, which is sort of like, okay, there's something wrong with me, and then a family history, which says there's something that happened to me, right?
Yeah, I think the consensus is that some people may be predisposed to a quote-unquote mental illness, but it's usually triggered by some sort of trauma. And my trauma was when I was a young kid, and things happened, and somehow I got off course. And I'm 45 now, and I'm sorry to say things haven't changed all that much. But I did have a good, after the result of my bipolar, I got the chance to go back to college in '97.
How do you mean, from the benefits? Or?
Right. I started getting VA benefits in early '97. At that time, I was on food stamps and just about broke again. But I did go back to school and did well. I actually worked as a research assistant in the Department of Psychiatry at Oregon Health Sciences University, where I studied the side effects of clozapine, which is a...
you got paid to study the...
I received a scholarship, and then I got paid minimum wage for like 4 to 8 hours a week that I worked there, because I was also going to school full time. It was very ironic that somebody with a diagnosis gets to do research on psychiatric medication. I tried to get into a prestigious school in Oregon, Reed College. I didn't get in. I got accepted to another school up in Washington called Evergreen State College. Came back east in the summer of '98, and my brother called me some really bad names, and I basically stopped talking to my family as a result of that for 6 years.
I think you said before that was actually a helpful thing in some ways, that the separation from them was positive.
Right, because I had a lot of pride, and I do have a huge ego, and I basically lived for school. I did also date a young lady. I guess we dated. She had dissociative disorder, and I was a musician, so she got attracted to that. We met at a janitorial school. Like I say, I've bounced around all over the place. Before I got my disability benefits from the VA, I was struggling to find any kind of work. Portland, Oregon had a training for disabled people to teach them how to be janitors. So
wow, that's hard given the amount of talent that you have.
Well,
so if you're just joining us, this is the Mental Health Show on Valley Free Radio. We're talking with Barney Plisko about the experiences in the mental health system, struggling with the diagnosis of bipolar and sort of a lifelong, would you call it a journey or a struggle, or how would you describe it?
It's been an adventure.
An adventure. What are some of the high points? Because I know that this has been like wild. It's like a wild roller coaster as well as like a downer.
Like I say, bipolar gave me the break to go to music school, which I ended up. Now, to tell you the story, I have to be careful because it's non-G rated.
Okay, well, this is a PG-13 radio station.
Well, let's put it this way. I found a job at a video store that sold adult-related material.
Okay.
And I met a drummer. This was in the fall of '98. At that time, I had no schooling because the VA in Washington shot down Evergreen. So I tried to go to school as a biochemist major and couldn't handle organic chemistry, so I dropped out.
You went into the porno industry.
I went to the porn industry.
Yeah, okay. Well, I can follow that.
Yeah, and actually from '97 through mid-'98, I experimented with all kinds of sexual adventures.
It's really interesting because it's about freedom, and yet at the same time it just sort of compounds stigma and shame and like hiding and isolation. Because
for me it just triggered my mania, and I was in these experiences, and then I'd freak out, going, "What the heck did I just do?" And but anyway, I found this job at a porn store, and they just sold videos. They didn't do any other things happen in porn stores. But anyway, I met this drummer.
This was a family porn store.
Yes, and it literally was. His wife, his husband and wife guy, and a guy with PTSD from Vietnam ran the show. And I met this drummer.
Sounds like a premise for a sitcom, actually.
Well, some people have told me I should write a book, and this is the first attempt I've done at any kind of public expose on my life.
So you're working at this porn store,
and I meet this drummer.
Yeah.
He's part of a blues band, and he says, and I told him I played bass. Anybody need a musician out there who has just exposed all, give me a call. Anyway.
You play bass and clarinet?
I played bass, clarinet, guitar. I experimented with saxophones, keyboards, and I could sing.
And you're a singer.
Yeah, so... Anyway, I hadn't done any of that. At the time that I met this guy, I wasn't playing music at all. Hadn't for quite some time. And I went to his open mics. One day I got hired to do a substitute gig on the coast of Oregon. Got paid. Met a music therapist. She was a groupie.
You had a music therapist as a groupie.
Exactly.
That's pretty cush. Yeah.
Yep, she was a groupie. She
for the bipolar
literally
musician,
jumped in. Our accommodations were, we slept on the floor upstairs from the bar that we played at, and I didn't have a sleeping bag, so the girl gives me her sleeping bag, and she literally jumps into the sack with the guitar player. Nothing went on, as far as I know. But that's where I found out about music therapy. So I talked to my VA voc rehab counselor and says, I want to be a music therapist. That's like my dream job, was always to work in music. So there was one school in Oregon that had it, and they funded it. It was, for anybody who's been in Oregon, the school is Willamette University in Salem. Very conservative, Methodist-related school. So here I come in, fresh off my gig in the porn industry, and had to hang around with little rich white kids, very close to church-oriented social activities. And I talked to my piano teacher at the time.
Somehow the voc rehab people just don't have a sense of how to find the right fit for people.
Do
they from janitor to like church schools?
I haven't earned any taxable income since I left the porn gig. And I was so guilty about the work that I did. I ripped up my last paycheck. So guilt and shame has been a huge factor. I mean, I blew tens of thousands of dollars because of guilt and shame and mania. It's been a very, very costly gig.
But you actually, you said that you actually have you're doing volunteer work, or you're doing something at the VA here with music therapy, right? You're playing.
Yeah, when I came back from the West Coast in October of 2004, I got hooked up with various choirs. I did church singing. By the way, I converted to Catholicism out of those.
Yeah, I want to hear about that too.
Yeah, like I say, I run the gamut, born Jewish, run around the Buddhists, do sex stuff, join the Catholic Church. Makes perfect sense.
Wait, it's Jews, Buddhists, and then Catholic, and actually conversion.
We try everything, or some of us do. But anyway,
usually the Buddhism is like the end of the line. Usually it's not it's not Judaism, Buddhism, and then Catholicism. It's usually some other formula.
Well, like I say, I haven't even talked about my 12 years of alcohol and non-prescribed drug abstinence, which I have done. I've been quote unquote clean and sober since mid-94, but I've had so many different addictions: sex addiction, gambling, spending, turmoil with my anger and shame and the money I've blown. I mean, it had good years. When I was in college, I got my music degree in May of 2002, but in February of 2001, I had my first suicide attempt. I OD'd on Depakote, which was the first anti-manic
mood stabilizer,
medication.
yeah, anticonvulsant.
Yeah, and I first got on that after I got diagnosed at the VA in mid-95. And in February of '01, I had this crush on this girl. My behavior was out of control. I was acting up in my classes. I was like, again, going back to old behaviors. And I was ashamed of myself, and I nearly died. Spent a couple of days in ICU, and then a few days in my second inpatient, not concluding the one I did in the Navy. And
it always seems that mental patients also have like bottles of pills around. That
Oh,
seems
yeah,
to be
I've
part
got
of
a-
the deal. Is that it's like, okay, now you've got a diagnosis and the means to off
Yeah.
yourself. Just save up some pills.
yeah, right now I have a 3-month supply of Zyprexa and 50 milligrams per shot, and 100 milligram tablets of lamotrigine. So yeah, they give it to you without like what the consequences are. And one, like, I've been inpatient, I don't know, almost 10 times in the last couple of years. It's usually, I get suicidal, or I want to hurt somebody, or I want to hurt myself, which is the standard battery of questions they do
Right,
before
self or others.
yeah, or in my case, just last year I tried living off medication. That led to a disorderly conduct episode in August.
With the Northampton Police Department.
And I'll say one thing. The Northampton cops were cool. I told them I was bipolar and off my meds. They had to arrest me. They put me in handcuffs. They had to do what they had to do. But they got
You were
me.
really acting out of control.
I was in rough shape.
Well, they were chasing you, right?
Yeah, it took 4 of them to
I'm sorry, I'm laughing, man, but that's just,
yeah, little
because,
me.
Barney is such he's such a gentle guy.
I'm 5'8", about 195 pounds, and I'm not a macho man at all. But I was out of control, and I had been out of control for a while. But that's the disease giveth, and the disease taketh away. Like I say, I was successful in music. I sung all over the world, all over the West Coast, East Coast, Europe. I played in an orchestra in Europe last year but for the last couple of years, my big problem has been sleeping. I've been sleeping for sometimes 14 to 16 hours a day.
Which is a side effect of the medication, but it's also, part of depression. And,
Right.
Yeah, so it's complicated.
And then a lot of shame and guilt comes out of that because I've been basically non-functioning.
By society's standards, although
Right. But the reason
like a
why...
seed is non-functioning by society's standards
right.
too. But, it's...
So I've been searching for volunteer, and going back to your... about the music therapy that I did at the VA.
Yeah.
I actually went into their inpatient psych ward and played guitar. I did that several times. In fact, they said I did about 100 hours there, which I don't think I did that much, but they sent me a pin, to commemorate my service, because as a veteran, a disabled veteran who has received so much, I felt like it was a moral obligation to see if there's a way I can help vets.
And this was at the VA hospital here in town, yeah.
Yeah, but I was hospitalized for 6 weeks after my arrest in August and September of last year. Well, since then, I haven't been back with my guitar. In fact, I did another short stint in the ward in March. Ironically, the day I was supposed to have done this show the first time, I called Will and told him I was in the hospital or about to get admitted again. And the problem that
It's just an occupational hazard of having a mental health show. Sometimes your guests go into the hospital.
This show has been preempted by hospitalization.
Right.
Anyway, I have been on since February of '01, when I was on 1,000 milligrams of Depakote, and that was it for like 5-6 years. That's all I was on. They put me on Celexa, which is an antidepressant. I did okay with that for about a year or so. And then I went to Europe in the summer of '02 to study German. The reason why was that I'm a singer, and I fell in love with German lieder, and I hit it off with the teacher at my 1 year of college German, and ended up freaking out in Munich because I thought the Nazis were going to get me. Oh, paranoia.
Was there, but there weren't actually Nazis.
No.
It was just, I'm in Germany, I'm a Jew, this is really triggering.
Yeah. I mean, I saw the place where Hitler, and they still commemorate. This is where Hitler had his big parade. There's a rock left from a synagogue that stood there, and it just, it was my own. I had it made. I can't tell you how many opportunities I've had to study, to travel, and all because of my bipolar diagnosis from the VA. And over the years,
because of the disability benefits,
and over the years from 95 through 04, my benefits steadily increased as they found that my disease was worse.
But if anybody has any illusions about disability benefits being a free ride, I mean, you can hear the suffering that has gone along with all of this. I mean, there have been a lot of opportunities too, but it's been really harrowing. You actually, you ended up going to the Vatican right after you converted to Catholicism.
Yes,
how did that happen,
well,
man?
A couple of years ago, when I was I did graduate music work in San Diego State. Had to drop out because of my behavior. I ran back to Oregon and had this codependent relationship with this guy who I lent all kinds of money to because I thought I could trust him. Wrong. Well, the money was lent out of guilt and shame. Anyway, and then I went to Portland State and was there from 03 to 04, but my behavior deteriorated to the point that I literally couldn't get out of bed. So I called my family after not talking to them for 6 years, and I came back, and now I live at my stepmother's house sleeping away. But somewhere in my travels, I heard about this Rome Festival Orchestra. And I was just converted to the Catholicism, or it was just about was going through the ceremony. So I emailed the people. Oh, by the way, I have an 8-year addiction to the computer. I've done everything you can possibly do with a computer. Blow tens of thousands of dollars on eBay, look at porn, start conversations with all kinds of people, and end up in Europe. It
does pay off sometimes, apparently.
Yeah, well, I paid for the trip.
Okay.
I had a lot of money saved at the time, and I flew to Rome. And then I traveled around Europe, went back to Rome to play in the orchestra, and wigged out. That's my term for my erratic antisocial behavior.
What's an example?
Oh, I yelled and screamed. I said this was a scam. The accommodations were terrible, and
like a blowing your top kind of.
Oh yeah, I made public scenes. I can't tell you how many times. And what does it go back to? I watched my mother do that in public.
Wow.
In restaurants. But I didn't want to blame anybody for it. This is my illness,
Well, I guess that's a question. I mean, obviously this is the Freedom Center show, and one of the things that we do is we talk about, well, there's this standard story that, okay, people have diseases and their illnesses, but then if you look at the science, they don't really know. They're putting this out, and they really want people to be on the drugs because there's so much money to be made. But my question to you is that, has it been helpful to you to think about it as a disease and as an illness? Because sometimes people do feel that that's a helpful way so that they don't have to feel like they're supposed to get better on their own or something like that.
It was a way to explain what happened in my life. It's like, this happened because of this. This happened because of that. And I didn't want to, because of my pride and my ego and all the opportunities that I had, I didn't want to use it as an excuse for failure. I wanted to use it as an opportunity.
Uh-huh.
But over the last several years, it hasn't been good. And usually I sabotage either with sleep or with anger. The other thing, in discussing the relationship with medication, I'm a disabled veteran. I've never paid a single dime for medication. I've been on everything from Geodon, lithium, Zyprexa. They wanted to put me on clozapine, but it was shot down by the VA muckety-mucks that make that decision.
Yeah, the pharmaceutical companies are making a lot of money off of different state and federal programs that endorse different expensive meds for people.
I mean, you look in their office, they got a Prozac, mouse, they have a Zyprexa, cup, they have all these doodads from all the medications, it's, but like somebody said to me, she says, you're making shots in the dark. We really don't know what the heck to do. I had I had the inpatient psychiatrist say no to antidepressants, yes to Zyprexa and lamotrigine. My psych nurse said, Wellbutrin. Nobody knows what the heck is going on.
They're contradicting each other.
It's like, what? So, and I see one psych nurse now at the VA, and she's like, she doesn't even know what meds I was on. She didn't know I was hospitalized. I did see a private psychotherapist for a while because I wanted to try something called EMDR.
Yeah, for trauma therapy.
For trauma recovery. And the woman said to me, she says, you're not ready for this. So
she's also said, you can't work and you can't live in a group.
It was actually the psych nurse that told me that I can't work. And even, I should also talk about the Starlight Center.
Sure.
That's
what I was going to ask you, is like, what sort of lessons have you learned and what has been helpful and positive in terms of your own recovery that you want to share with other people?
There's an international clubhouse organization, and there's one in Florence called Starlight Center. And if anybody from there is listening, I really respect what they do. The problem is even they've said to me that work is not an answer for you. So I've been looking desperately for places to volunteer at that I could stick with. I just found out about something today called, should I mention the music thing?
Sure, why not?
It's called IMA. It's an Institute for Musical Arts. It's
like a nonprofit school.
It's a nonprofit school to help young women in the music business. And they have several workshops. If you want to check out their website, it's ima.org.
That's one of the things actually that I was thinking about is when you first came to the Freedom Center. I mean, you had some of these experiences where you kind of blew your top and things were rough, but then you kept coming back. And what we didn't do is we didn't say, "Oh no, Barney, you can't come here. You're not ready for this, or you can't handle a group." And now you've been coming for almost 2 years, and now you actually are facilitating groups. And, as far as I can tell, you're very supportive to other people, and people really appreciate having you there. So,
yeah, one of my symptoms is withdrawal. Like I was singing with a church group, another group, and when I got depressed, I'd cut everybody off and withdraw.
Yeah,
and this has been another real struggle of mine. And then I just curl up in a ball, sleep. The meds are both sedatives, so it's very easy to just stay in bed. But I want to do more than that. And the Freedom Center has been welcoming and open. We've also talked about we wish we could do more, because basically Freedom Center is this nebulous organization that has a few, quote unquote outpatient kind of things. But the bottom line is that people with mental illness don't want to be stigmatized. We don't want to be alone. We can't go to our families because they sure can't fix us. All they can do is nod their head. And when I was in the hospital for 6 weeks, my stepmother visited me every couple of days. I mean, she was really supportive. I'm living with her. But I feel ashamed, around the family. My sister's pregnant, and my brother works hard, and I sleep. But they don't understand. But I've received some support. Just the fact that I'm back east, after not talking to them for 6 years, I think says something about my family. But the source of my abuse is, primarily my mother. But we can't hold grudges. We have to move on. We have to say, I have an illness. This is where it helps to have the illness label, because we can almost hold it in our hands and say, this is my disease. Let's deal with it the best we can. And Freedom Center is an organization that is growing to meet the needs of people like us that want to connect, want to share, and want to help.
Yeah, people talk about the the trauma, that was actually a label that I used on myself that was actually, I found really helpful, was trauma survivor. I don't really, I sort of identify with that now, but I don't. And it was a way of saying, okay, this is something that's bigger than I can handle. It's something that it's not my fault. I don't have to feel guilty. I don't have to feel shame because this is something that happened to me. And then the thing about using the trauma idea is that, I'm healthy, I'm whole, I'm normal, I'm just the same as everybody else. I have my own uniqueness, and this thing happened to me. And then now I'm injured, I'm traumatized. And I think that's what can be one of the dangers of like a bipolar diagnosis. You say, well, yeah, I'm traumatized, and also there's something wrong with me on like a genetic, biological, my brain is messed up. I mean, it may be that your brain is just, you have a Barney brain, and it's a very talented, intelligent, musical ability, and you're sensitive, and so maybe whatever it was that predisposed you to get wild and get out of control might be really bound up in your creativity and your gifts. It may not be anything that's like a weakness or an abnormality or some kind of deficiency or something. I mean, that's my concern about that whole way of looking at it.
People like us see things differently in life. We're sensitive to 9/11. We're sensitive to the war. We're sensitive to this. We're sensitive to
being in Germany and seeing commemorations of Hitler. And
the support group that I go for to deal with my trauma, I've done two things. One is go to Men's Resource Center. They have groups for trauma. They're based in Amherst. The other thing is I've been going for the last couple of years to a 12-step group called Survivors of Incest Anonymous. And we meet at Center Street on Sundays from 7 to 8:45.
Can people just come to that if they
Yes. It's the only stipulation is that you're a survivor of some sort of sexual abuse, and it doesn't have to be, intercourse or rape or anything like that.
Let me ask you about that. I mean, because sexual abuse, I mean, we tend to think, okay, incest. We tend to think, okay, rape. But it can be more subtle than that, right?
Exactly. And, in my case, it was subtle between my mother and me.
Because I had also this kind of relationship with my mom, and I think a lot of it was that my dad is very traumatized Korean War vet, and so their relationship was all messed up. My mom's a sexual abuse survivor herself, and then she ends up putting all this, how should I describe it, weird energy, like weird things would happen. She did things, she was kind of invasive when I was a kid, and then now I kind of carry that with me. And so I'm hesitant to say, okay, I'm a sexual abuse survivor because I wasn't like held down and molested.
Right.
But on the other hand, there was touching that happened, and there were things that happened that was a little bit like, this is really not right. And it left me with certain kind of scarring.
There's a profile, and, when I started going, actually at the time that I found SIA, I was going to 12-step groups for sex addiction. And, I found out about this SIA thing, and I went to it, and I cried my eyes out the first meeting, but I kept going. And there were people that were molested and raped and everything like that, but they were very welcoming to me. And
so there wasn't any like, oh, you're not as serious or as severe as us.
Not at all. And then I happened to find a group in Northampton. I saw a poster, and I've been going to that now for almost 2 years. It's usually just me and the other guy. The two of us have kept this meeting going for a long time. I know
But you're open to new people, so people can get in touch with the Freedom Center.
Probably breaking my anonymity, but I think
it's yours to break if you want.
And maybe it might help somebody out there who's
that's the idea.
Has had this experience.
That's the idea of the show, for sure.
And in fact, in the documents or the literature, they mention the gentler the abuse, the more guilt the person inappropriately carries. And
there's a lot of research coming out now around domestic violence where they're actually looking at the impact, the long-term impact that domestic violence has, and the emotional abuse. There are studies now that say that the emotional abuse has a more serious impact than physical abuse, like hitting or burning or something, and which is, in my experience, that seems to make a lot of sense for the kinds of things that happened in the times when my father was physically violent with me weren't nearly as difficult for me to deal with as his wild, unpredictable, emotional stuff that was going on, how scary and how angry he would get. And then And then later on, I'm sort of thinking, well, am I a child abuse survivor? Well, I was, I got physically hurt a few times. Really, it wasn't like and I get really confused. So that's why I think it's important to talk about this stuff from the perspective of, okay, we're suffering. How do we figure it out? What doesn't feel right about our childhood? How do we sort this out? How do we move through this and understand it and get a grip on it, rather than being so hung up on, more like a criminal notion of like abuse is a crime, therefore you only say the abuse happened if a crime, and you want to pursue, prosecution. That's not how I think about it at all,
Well, my father was an abuse survivor. His father was a violent alcoholic. My father became a violent alcoholic when he drank. He beat up my mother and my stepmother.
So it runs in your family. It must be genetic, right?
My stepmother is a abuse survivor, but no, they've kept this whole thing about the image of a fantasy family and all this.
Omerta. It's like a family omerta.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is what it is.
Well, listen, Barney, I really want to... Do you have any last final things you want to leave us with? Maybe more on a positive note, or words of encouragement for any of the listeners or anything? People can meet Barney, too. If you want to come and... If you're involved with, these issues, these affect you, you can certainly come to our support group. And if you contact the Freedom Center through our website, we can put you in touch with Barney.
Well, I received a lot of breaks through the bipolar label. And it gave me something constructive to deal with that I could hold in my hands. If I had diabetes or something, or cancer, that would be my explanation. Here it's a mental illness. You can't see it, but there's people out there that care, that understand what you're going through. And but you have to be proactive. You can't just be complacent with this. You have to deal with it.
Right on. Well, thanks a lot, Barney Plisko, for joining us on the Freedom Center Mental Health Show. We'll be back next Wednesday. Thanks a lot for tuning in.
What else should I be?